Her triumphs.
I took a group of women that didn't believe in themselves, and I just believed in them.
Her trials.
I never wanted to go to practice. I was losing a ton of weight.
Her story.
I just put my faith in God and just trusted the system.
Her why.
I want people to see what I did and say, oh, that's so awesome. I'm going to be better than that. That would be how I hope that this journey ends.
This is Her Why, where we tell the stories from BYU women's sports. Here is your host, Lauren McLean.
We're so glad you've joined us for Her Why, where we celebrate the women that make BYU sports great. Joining us now is BYU swim and dive head coach, Tamber McAllister. Thank you so much for being here with me.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me to come.
You were named the head BYU swim and dive coach on May 8th, 2024. Has that new title sunk in for you yet?
No, definitely not.
Is it still kind of weird, like, I'm the head coach?
Yeah.
Because you were an assistant here for a long time.
Yeah, a very long time.
So what does that mean to you to be able to say, I am the head coach of this program?
Well, it was always something that, was kind of a big goal, potentially. I've been a head coach once before, but not of a men's and women's combined program. So a little more responsibility here, and it's just fun. I love BYU, so it's very close to my heart, and I'm happy to be here.
What was the hiring process like for you? Obviously, a lot of familiarity. So what was that like?
There was a lot of familiarity, and I, love the administration here at BYU. I think they've done a great job leading our programs. And so just expressing what my vision was for the program that was maybe different than what was before, and what I envisioned for the future. So I had to be very clear about what I wanted and what I appreciate about the program that I wanted to continue, and what things that I wanted to see changed as well.
And Tom was sold.
Yeah, I guess so.
Did you have any idea that Shari was stepping down? Was that something you knew was coming and you were kind of preparing for?
Yeah, I think the timeline wasn't exact, but she and I, have a very close relationship. And so she had talked about that, happening and coming up in the near future.
What have you learned from her over the years? Things you said you mentioned you want to keep implementing in the program, and maybe just her as a person, as a woman.
Yeah. Shari is very amazing at caring about the individuals on the team. And men's and women's swim program is no joke. There's 54 swimmers on the team, plus you've got your divers. And so it's a big group. And she showed me over the years just how to reach out to each individual to make sure that they are happy and getting the things that they need. So
you mentioned that you've been a head coach before at Utah Tech. What's it like taking over at your alma mater? How's that feeling different?
Yeah, it's so much easier to cheer for your alma mater because it's ingrained in your competitive spirit. I didn't grow up necessarily a BYU fan. I'm from California. Didn't have a family that really was BYU fans. And so when I decided to come to BYU, learning about what it was to be a BYU Cougar and what that meant, and just the competitive side of being in athletics here. I really took that on and took it to heart as an athlete. And so, obviously as a coach, I had to experience some other things and get some experience in other universities, but it was really easy to decide to come back to BYU when the time was right.
And there's a lot of phenomenal competitors that you were the coach of. You just took two swimmers, Brad Prolo and Jordan Tiffany, to the Olympic trials at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, Indiana. You qualified for the Olympic trials in 2000. What was it like going back almost 25 years later?
Yeah, it was pretty surreal. The sport has evolved quite a bit. Back when I went, it was showing up for a swim meet with high expectations. But if you had the chance to watch it all recently, it is a production now. Like, it is so much fun and exciting. There's a lot of fans, and USA Swimming has done a really good job of making it an event where athletes want to be there, and coaches want to take athletes there, and it's the highest level that you can get within the United States. So
you prefer it this way than how it used to be?
Yeah,
there's obviously more pressure, right?
Yeah.
It seems like there'd be more pressure on.
There is more pressure, but I also think that the excitement can take athletes to another level, you know? And so it's fun for sure. You just have to prepare the athletes a little bit differently.
Yeah. Let's get to know you a little bit better. You grew up in El Dorado Hills, California. Yeah. What was it like for you growing up there?
It was great. My family moved to El Dorado Hills when I was, 8th grade. Grew up in the Sacramento area mostly. And I swam a lot. My mom was my swim coach as a young girl, from age 5 to about 14. And so that was kind of my introduction to swimming. I didn't know anything else really. Yeah. So
did you play any other sports besides?
Yeah, I was an athlete. Like I loved to compete in anything. So, put me on the time mile in PE and I go 5:45 and the coach is like, okay, come do cross country. Okay, I'll do cross country for a little bit. And I tried track and volleyball and I loved anything. I just loved that competitive side of sports.
Did you like having your mom as a coach?
Oh, yeah.
You did like it?
I loved it.
Because that can go either way for a lot of kids, right?
But I think there was always something inside of me, not that I knew I was going to be a coach at that age, but I was a student of the sport in a way. I always wanted to know what was going on, why she was coaching us the way that she was, like what was the purpose behind things. And so we lived about 30 minutes away from where I trained. Wow. And so my mom would stop and pick up all these different athletes along the way to make sure they got to practice. And the whole way I'm just asking questions. What are we doing today? What do I need to do to be faster? And so I was always a student of the sport. And so I think for that reason, I loved it.
You were meant to be a coach even from when you were a little girl.
Yeah, I think so.
You've mentioned in other interviews that your parents didn't talk much about college growing up, so it wasn't really the norm. What inspired you to take that step and to want to go to college?
Yeah, I think the reason my parents didn't talk a lot about college is because neither of them experienced college at a young age. My mom did go back to school when I was in junior high. And so seeing her do that and how much it helped her with like not only knowledge, but just like her confidence too, and loving what she did. She went back after being a coach and became a nurse. And so when I saw her do that, I think I knew I wanted to go to college because of the empowerment that it gave her. And I knew that my parents probably wouldn't be able to afford to send me to college. And so swimming was my vehicle to be able to make that happen.
Was your mom a big role model for you growing up?
Huge.
What would you say you learned most from her and maybe even her coaching style that you try and implement yourself?
She definitely taught us to not just sit back and let things happen to you as a competitor. Like you had to make them happen. So you had to work hard. You had to show up consistently. You had to prove that there wasn't a reason the coach should leave you off of a relay or whatever. So just that you had more control than what a lot of athletes, I think that they do, Yeah. Don't let it happen to you. Make it happen.
I love that mentality. I think that's super powerful. When did you know that you wanted to start competing and taking swimming more seriously instead of like, this is just for fun to, no, I love this. I want to do this. I'm good at this.
I actually remember in 7th grade, I was doing track and I did the high jump. And I think I even set a school record doing it, but then I landed and broke my finger. I bent my finger back and broke it. And so I was out of swimming for a little while. And just sitting out of practices like made me realize I don't want to be able to not swim. So I kind of finished out the track season and just told my mom from here on out, I'm just swimming. And that was about the same time that my mom retired from coaching. I was about 13 or 14. And like I said, she was going back to school to become a nurse and she didn't want to just leave me to decide what to do. So she went and interviewed all the coaches in the Sacramento area to try and decide what's going to be the best program for Tamber to go to. She knew I would want to go to the popular one, the one that all the people were at the time. And she came to me and she said, I'm retiring. I'm not going to coach anymore. I think that you need to try this program. And she named this specific coach. And if you do, I think if you give it at least 6 months, I think you'll be happy. And so I did as a freshman. And I immediately just took off with this coach. And at that point, he was really great. He, sat me down and we set long-term goals. I think even my freshman year in high school, I knew I wanted to make Olympic trials by the end of my senior year. And that's what we made happen.
What was the process like then after that of choosing somewhere to swim at the next level?
Talking college and university. That was definitely difficult. My coach was not LDS, and so he did not have BYU on his radar at all. Right. And so his encouragement was purely swimming specific, and so he's encouraging me to go to Cal and Alabama and a couple of other, Arizona State. And so I did take trips to those other schools, and I thought swimming was definitely the reason I would pick a school. And I didn't really have BYU on my radar, but Stan Crump at the time, he reached out and he said, just come take a trip out here and see what you think. And so I came on a trip and I just loved every second of it. I had decided before my trip, I'm going to go to Arizona State. And when I left my trip, I changed my mind and just knew that BYU was the place that I needed to be.
So you ended up swimming at BYU in the early 2000s. What was the program like in the early 2000s?
Yeah, so Stan Crump was the head coach of the women's team, and the men's and women's teams were two separate entities. We traveled separately. We might have competed at like the same championship meets and stuff, but we did a lot of things separate. For me, that was great at the time. I got to coach the women only when I first started at BYU. And watched as we combined the men's and women's programs, and I love the way it is now. I wouldn't go back, but for me at the time, it was a great experience. I'm very close with a lot of my teammates that were here at BYU at the time still, and just adore them and love them.
Well, you were a fantastic swimmer. You accomplished a lot at BYU, still the number 5 all-time record in the 200 breaststroke that you set in 2001. Do you feel like your achievements and what you were able to accomplish when you were a swimmer at BYU helped you gain a little bit of respect from your swimmers now? Yeah,
I think so. As much as they look back and think, oh man, she's so old, I'm sure. I think that the fact that my times are still somewhat relevant means something to them. They think, I know what I'm talking about in certain aspects, and they do respect that.
So we mentioned this. You went to the Olympic trials in 2000, competed in the 200 and 100 breaststroke. You finished 12th and 27th. What was that whole experience like? You mentioned the atmosphere is different, but for you personally, what was that experience like?
I look back at that, and my coach did a really great job preparing me. I had been to some senior national level competitions before that, and he did a great job of teaching me how to show up at a big meet and just keep my nerves calm and trust the training that I had done. And so I felt really prepared showing up. And, my goal going into it was to try and make a semifinal. And that's the top 16 out of prelims. And so I was able to do that, drop a bunch of time. And so the next component of that is being in the ready room with Olympians. You're sitting next to Amanda Beard and Staciana Stitz, and that could have easily just, intimidated me. But I decided to embrace it and just, I'm just going to go out there and do the best I can, and dropped a little bit more time, got 12th place, didn't quite make the final because you had to be top 8, but just really loved my experience. I think back and share my experiences a lot. I remember specifically warming up at that meet and not feeling the best that I ever had. And so I at first was like, okay, I'm not feeling great. What's going to happen? And I remember my coach just sitting me down, trust the training. You're ready for this. Don't worry about all the feels and just make it happen. And so I share that with my athletes fairly often when they come to me before a meet and I'm not feeling very good. That's okay. You can still make it happen. Doesn't matter.
That's incredible. You mentioned that you decided not to be super intimidated, right? From some of these Olympians that you were competing against. Did you go head to head with any of them?
Yeah, I was, 2 lanes over. You have an Olympic gold medalist from 4 years before. So definitely could have been very intimidating.
Did you have the mentality at all? And what was the name of that?
Christy Kowal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you have the mentality like, oh, I'm going to beat her? Or was it more like, I'm going to just do my best and focus on what I'm doing?
I think my coach did a great job of helping me keep my head in my own race.
Yeah.
I couldn't worry about what she was going to do. But I definitely wanted to give her a run for the money, right?
Right. That's so cool.
Yeah.
How has participating in a sport at such a high level helped you become a successful coach? How does that carry over?
I think number one, I'm empathetic towards the athletes. I know where they're coming from in a lot of ways. I grew up in a age of swimming where the training was a grind, and that wore on me over time, definitely. And so the change in my coaching style, it kind of compensates for that. I want the athletes to come to practice and enjoy what they're doing and love it every day. And so I feel like I have to mix it up more often. And yes, there's an aspect of the hard work and the grind to it, but it's got to be fun and enjoying the process along the way as well.
When we come back, we'll discuss transitioning into the Big 12 and what it's like being a female coach over the men's team. This is Her Why. Welcome back to Her Why. I'm Lauren McLean with BYU Swim and Dive head coach Tamber McAllister. So you were the head coach at Utah Tech University before resigning and making the switch to BYU. What was your thought process as you went through that decision?
I really felt like God led me to Utah Tech. There were a lot of things that fell into place for that to happen. And I experienced tremendous growth when I was there as a head coach. There's duties and expectations as a head coach that you just don't experience as an assistant coach. And I gained a lot of respect for those that I worked with that were, over me as a head coach when I was in that place. And, as Shari took over in 2018, she reached out and just expressed that she wanted me to be able to come back and help her with that transition. And it was really a no-brainer for me. I loved Shari. We have a great relationship. I knew what her vision was, and I knew I could support that and that we could move forward together as a group of coaches. And, I really wanted to gain the experience at Utah Tech, but my heart was always with BYU. Yeah. And so when I had the opportunity to come back, it was an easy choice. And, I think the biggest concern was just my kids. I've got 4 kids. And so, just expressing to them that was my desire, they were a little hesitant at first. I had a girl going into the junior year in high school, and that's a hard age to transition, and my kids were pretty happy. But looking back now, I've seen God's hand in making that transition with my family. And, I've asked my kids, do you guys regret moving back up here? And nope, they don't hesitate. So I think that it all works out the way that it needs to when it's God's purpose. So.
Well, now I got to ask, are your kids swimmers?
No, none of them, actually.
Really?
I mean, they all know how to swim, and they've done like summer swim team, but they each have their own passions. And I actually love that for them because they don't feel like they have to do something for me, and they're doing it for themselves. That just gives them more internal drive, I think, for what they're doing.
Is it kind of athletic based, or are they all over the place?
And arts, yeah. Like my oldest daughter, she just went to Utah Tech, and she was on a scholarship for like performance arts.
Goodness.
So yeah.
How cool is that?
So a variety of things.
Well, while you were at Utah Tech, you did a lot of great things. One of those being you helped transition their swimming program to the Division I level. That's a big job. Yeah. What was that like for you?
That was a whirlwind for sure. I think taking a program, not only did we transition from Division II to Division I, but the program itself was only 2 years old at the time. They had just started their swim program. So when you start a swim program, you're taking bodies, you're taking athletes that can fill a roster, and then you have to kind of evolve the recruiting really quickly. A lot quicker than a normal program. And so changing, the expectations of, oh, we're just here to have fun, to like, let's be competitive. Yeah. We didn't want to go into the WAC being last, and so I had to really work with the girls on the mental side of changing their perspective of not just showing up and being there for them, but like, how can we help this team be progress and be competitive at the Division I level? So that was definitely tricky, for sure.
What would you say is one of the highlights when you look back at your time as head coach of Utah Tech?
One of my memories that comes back most frequently, it's actually a silly one, but we had a really great trip to we went to Seattle and University of Idaho, and we did well. We beat both of those teams. But on the way back, the girls were just so close. It was a women's only team. We at Utah Tech, we have that 2-hour drive to Vegas off of the airplane. So we get off the airplane and we get on this party bus, is what I call it, and it's like a small bus, and it's got the light, like the neon lights inside and everything. And one of the girls puts on some music, and we just danced the whole way back from Las Vegas. And it just, like, the memory of like how close our team was, that's one of the things that I hold close to my heart, for sure.
I love that. So I'm sure a little bit difficult to leave after all that.
Oh, yeah.
But you come back, you're the assistant coach for a couple of years, then you're named head coach of the program. What were some of your goals when you were first named head coach and you took over the helm?
I think Shari's done a great job in, helping our team transition to the Big 12. We had a great first year. And so continuing that momentum is definitely a huge one for me. Our women's team has definitely increased their competitiveness in the last couple of years. And so, we'd love to be in the top 3 at the Big 12 championships in the next couple of years, if not at the top of the Big 12 conference. And that's a long way from where we were, 3 or 4 years ago. On the men's side, just continuing having that NCAA presence and including the women on that. We want to make a national presence every year. And I know that was a goal of Shari's as well. I think more about the details of how to do that is where it changes a little bit, know.
Was transitioning to the Big 12 similar to what you had to do at Utah Tech, or was it a completely different beast?
I actually would say it was pretty similar, from going Division II to Division I, and then the only difference is just the level of competitiveness, obviously. Big 12 is a high level of competition. But I love that our team showed up year one, proving that they're here ready to compete and that they belong.
How do you handle the pressure of being a high level coach?
That's a good question. I'm still figuring that one out. No, I think I'm actually pretty good at managing my emotions. I try not to take things too hard. I don't ride the emotions super high, and I don't ride them super low. And that makes it a little bit easier when things are difficult. I'm able to take an outsider's perspective and look at the whole situation, and not jump to conclusions very quickly, and make sure I figure out what's going on before I try and react to it. So.
The coaching staff is predominantly female.
Mm-hmm.
How does that influence the dynamic of the team, if at all?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think of it necessarily as female very often. I just think that we have some of the greatest coaches in the area. And I would say, like, the thing that I love about, for example, like my role of leadership with this team is a lot of these athletes look at me as a second mom, right? Mm-hmm. Like, they're looking not just to be the best competitors they can, but also a lot of times they're looking for life advice and how to be better people. And so, that's a natural instinct for me as a mother and a woman. And so, I don't think it's a bad thing to have around. I think it's a positive in a lot of ways. We know how to empathize and direct and help these kids, become who they are meant to be.
I think it is so cool and so unique that you were over the men's team as well, because you see a lot men over women's team, mm-hmm. but rarely the opposite. Mm-hmm. So what's it like for you being the head coach of a men's team?
I love it. I think I don't know. I think that it probably could be intimidating for some people, but I feel very comfortable with it. I think that I feel very respected by them. They, I don't think that they look down on me in any way. And so I think it's a fun relationship to build with the men's team. Obviously, I talked about how even keel I am, and a men's team is not, like they need some energy and they need to be ramped up. So I think it's just about empowering the right leaders on the team and within the staff to be able to compensate for that a little bit with me.
What's it been like to watch some of your swimmers like Brad Prolo and others who kind of grew up in front of you develop? What's that been like to watch?
It's awesome. I think that's why I do what I do is developing the relationships that I can with them over time, but B, watching them make choices and not always the best ones, but the learning and the growth that comes through the experiences that they have through athletics makes them into amazing individuals. And I think that's what I love about what I do.
You've mentioned your coaches, all of the swim coaches right now, including you, Yolanda, Rachel, Hayden, and recently retired Shari. They all swam for BYU. So that's an amazing legacy. And why do you think it's important for this team to have these coaches that swam here at BYU?
I think the part of it that is very unique is, BYU is a unique university.
Yeah.
We have the honor code, and we're based on religiously through the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And that's a hard thing to teach a coach, to work into the competitive side of things. And so someone who's experienced that themselves, they know how it works. And I think that's an easy transition when they've swam here. Now, it doesn't have to be the case, but I think that we use it as a benefit for our team. For sure.
What is it about swimming and coaching that you love so much that keeps you coming back day in and day out and for years now?
I think it's just the opportunity to get better every day, helping the athletes get better, and me myself. I don't like being on cruise control and just doing the same thing all the time. So the athletes challenge me very often, and I love that. I, in fact, ask them to do that in a lot of ways. If they wonder why I do what I do, challenge me on it. Let me explain it to you so that I make sure that I know why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I can progress as I can coach them along the way as well.
I'm here with BYU Swim and Dive head coach Tamber McAllister. Tamber, thank you so much for taking the time and coming on with me, and good luck in the future with this team.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Thanks also to Annie Robinson and Sydney Simpson for producing this episode. Cleon Wall is the senior producer. Her Why is a production of BYU Radio. You can download and listen to all episodes of Her Why on the BYU Radio app or wherever you find podcasts. Her Why is a production of BYU Radio.